Broadcasting live from the middle of America, welcome to the Oklahoma City Real Estate Show. Covering local market data, news, and reports to arm you with information you need to empower your investing and strengthen your American rights. Top realtor, investor, husband, father, and veteran. Here is your host, Landon Witt.
Hey, what's up? I'm Jeff Brown. I just kind of want to say I'm really excited to be here at Hotel Park. I'm excited for the opening, and we're going to see the Kings of Leon and Braun show, which I think is going to be an amazing experience.
What do you think so far, seeing the city? Has it changed much? Has you been here before?
Since last time I've been here, it's a little bit different, but I like the easy access, being able to walk places. Got the scooters all over the place. That's pretty cool. We could take those somewhere if we wanted to, and now this new park looks like it's going to be pretty fun.
So I came from Texas, and I've only lived here for about a year and a half, but it is so culturally diverse. There's a lot of, different restaurants, and food is like a big thing for me. I'm a huge foodie, and I thought I'd come here and it would be like very, very much one type, and it's been so much fun. The past year, we love it here.
Hi, I'm Tim. I live here in OKC, and I'm here to see Kings of Leon tonight and see if they'll respect our Second Amendment rights and let us in. And I really love Oklahoma. We have a lot of freedoms here, and we're getting free. Every year we get more freedoms, and it's just a beautiful city to live in.
Cool. What do you think about 5 years from now? You think this is going to be a young town, or you think it's going to be an old Crankyville?
Gosh, I feel like it's going to be way younger. I feel like it's getting super modern and cool, and I think it's going to continue to do that.
Yeah, same here. I definitely think the same thing. It's all young people coming out here.
Well, when people think of OKC, they think of Hicks and country people, but it's honestly a real big city. Honestly, people don't realize it. They think of Cowboys. It's the opposite of that.
All right, so what do you think about 5 years from now? You think this is going to be a younger city?
Oh, yeah, the millennials and all that, they're going to take over. Now, granted, I will say the older people, they're evolving, so to speak, if that's the right way to say it, but they're actually becoming more, I guess you can say, hip. So that's neat, too. So in 5 years, it might be younger, but even the older people, they're going to act younger. You know what I mean? You might see someone who's 50, but they're going to act 30.
Definitely. My husband and I are in our 30s, and we feel like it's a young town. Sometimes I feel a little too old for it.
The next 5 years is going to be crazy.
All right, well, there you go. You heard it. All right. Welcome to episode 56 on the Oklahoma City Real Estate Show. The footage you are watching, we recorded at Scissortail Park. Over 28,000 people attended the grand opening ceremony there this past Friday. Over the weekend, on Saturday, they opened the park, which spans the north section over 40-acre beautiful park. Really neat to see what the MAPS $3 or MAPS $4 have gone towards. We've got quite a bit to discuss today, as it is the beginning of October, which we now have the recap of September. We've also got some good news to talk about. So I want to jump into the numbers, and then our guest on this show today is an investor that flew in from California to look at some properties. We got a chance to do some question and answer, and really just me answering is what when I reviewed the tape. But he had some good questions, and I was able to elaborate on some ideas and some things that really a lot of investors have been asking me about. So I was able to kind of just elaborate on some thoughts and answers from some existing problems, and then also kind of some forethinking of what we're kind of seeing the future going on in Oklahoma City. So you'll want to stay tuned for that for sure. But let's jump into the market numbers for the month of September. First up, I want to bring in the median sales price over the course of September. Comes in for Oklahoma City at $165,744. That being the median sales price for the entire Oklahoma City metropolitan area, which is larger than our usual 10 square mile metric. That in contrast with the Northwest Oklahoma City core, which if you take the 4 quadrants of Oklahoma City within the turnpike there on the northwest side, this would be all the northwest area. That would be like north of I-40 all the way to the turnpike or Memorial Road, and then as far east as 235. And really, I cut a lot of Western on a lot of our searches. I'm staying west of Western, but this report would stay west of 235, coming in at $201 or $201,500 for the Northwest City core. Also, looking at the median price per square foot, you've got Oklahoma City coming in at $100 per square foot, with the Northwest Oklahoma City core coming in at $132 per square foot. Showings per listing, interesting metric you won't find anywhere else. This Oklahoma City, in general, we're looking at 5.4 showings before going pending. Northwest Oklahoma City core, 5.2 showings. Now, how can you have a point, half a showing or a quarter of a showing, blah, 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 blah. Well, just bear with us on the numbers. It kind of breaks down. But in the whole, 5 showings, that's not that much, guys. That, like I've been talking about, is that first weekend, second weekend on the market. So you're looking at a 13-day median usually, and then that's the first and second weekend. So getting into our month's supply of homes for sale, we're looking at, and this is a metric we watch very closely, looking at a diversion here. Important numbers. Look at that blue line. That blue line represents the Northwest Oklahoma City core. We're now at 3 months supply of inventory. We're gaining up from where we were the start of the summer. We were as low as 1.8 months of supply. And now we're at 3 months supply, which we haven't been all year. I mean, in fact, we haven't been 3 months supply for the last 2.5 years if we back out. Let's go to that metric now. Month supply of homes. Now we're going to break this down into from only 100,000 to 173,000. We now look at 1.7 months supply of inventory for Northwest Oklahoma City, and just 1.2 months supply of inventory in the affordability index, again from that 100 to 173,000, which is really should be 175,000. I don't know why our metric does that, but this is important to note though. Still seeing our rise going up, and this goes back to 2018. This is just for the year. We're at the highest point of the year. Now going back to the 3 year month supply of homes for sale. Going back to 2016, look, end of 2016, we were really high at 2.5 months supply of inventory. And really, I remember 2016 into 2017, we were getting pretty good deals as a buyer's agent. Now 2017, matching where we are now. And 2017 was still a really good year for buyer negotiation. And really buyers and sellers were seeing good mix between 2017 and 2018. And then bam, getting all the way over to now, which we're at 1.7% or 1.7 months supply of inventory in the affordability index. So quite possibly a slow coming in the market in terms of looking to cool that seller's market. So interesting stuff. We've been so hot, such a hot seller's market this summer, and I've really had instances where we've almost just really been advising buyers, hey, like, whoa, buy it if you really want it, but understand that if you have to move really quickly, you might not really make any money. You might take a wash on this. And some of the homes they're just so beautiful, or such in a great location, or so vogue that people buy it anyways. So on to the news. I want to touch on a national topic here of great concern for realtors that have their ears to the national news. The Department of Justice filing has now indicated a wider probe into the buyer-broker commission, what we're calling the commission antitrust law question, and that is to when we have an MLS, right, you don't see the buyer's commission on just the public, right? You don't know how much your buyer's agent is getting paid. And what this lawsuit is saying is that you have to disclose to the public how much people are getting, or else it could be considered price fixing, because then we could all come together as brokers in a secret lair. Well, more reports and more evidence is being shown in that court case that may be in fact what has been going on for the entire career of MLS listings. And so we're seeing a reaction already occurring in Washington State. In fact, they just announced today Redfin, Windermere, Coldwell Banker Bain have all confirmed that they will display commissions on listing. This coming before the Northwest MLS ruling will take effect. That affects over 30,000 real estate brokers and 2,300 member offices in Washington. So you'll now be seeing in that area of the country Redfin listings having buyer broker commission then transparent on there. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean we could see a lot more pressure in the transaction now that the numbers are just put right in front of your faces. You can kind of see where the seller is having to barter with the amount that he's having to pay for the brokering of the transaction, which could result in better value for both the selling and buying. And in markets like ours, where we're heavy in the seller's market, we're seeing a lot more for sale by owners being successful on Zillow. Now, I've got tons of stories, just even this last week, where for sale by owners on Zillow are losing thousands of dollars due to just clerical errors and just not setting it up correctly. So, only time will tell what putting pressure on the income of realtors will result in actually being a better market, or if it actually won't be. But we'll find out. But that new ruling coming out. As far as our local news, a new live music venue and brewery planned for West Downtown. This coming from the owners of Tower Theater, Steven Tyler and Chad Whitehead. Basically, there's not enough live music venues they've discovered, and they felt, and I've felt that myself as well. So they're plan to open a new 500-person capacity live music space to complement their other two venues. This going to be at 2nd Street and Western. The entire project should be completed next year into 2020. So that'll be cool to add to the downtown assortment of things coming. Really, again, I said this time before, really for the last year and a half and 2 years, is we're looking like Austin. We are looking like Austin. Maps 4 is getting on the table. I want to talk about some of the concepts that they've presented, one of which is a city-owned surf park. City-owned surf park facility would cost $1.45 million and would come from $7.9 million in excess MAPS funds that were allocated to the Boathouse Foundation as part of improving the MAPS 3 whitewater facility that opened in 2016. Those MAPS funds obviously being applied to create this whole tourism city that we've got going on here that we're loving so much, these things to do. But let's look a little closer as they're beginning to look into investing in some of these. The Boathouse District that was so loved as part of MAPS 3 is now needing another bailout. An item for bailing out the Boathouse Foundation came before City Council. Since the Boathouse District began, the success of the MAPS 3 project has been questionable. The 2019 budget started with a shortfall of $3 million. The city manager requested on behalf of the foundation $1.5 million for management fees. Ward 8 Councilman Mark Stonecipher said that he looked into the audits and new organizational structure of the foundation. He wants to see it be sustainable. He said it needs more accountability, recommending a report from foundation leadership every 90 days before the council. Ultimately, the bailout was approved with an amendment for Stonecipher's 90-day report. Only Ward 5 Councilman David Greenwell voted against the measure. the council's a really tight-knit community, so when one person votes against it, it's definitely an interesting mix there. Last up on the news for this week, marijuana businesses creating a property management challenges or potentially nightmares. This article coming from Richard Mize over at the Oklahoman. He's got a couple of points that he points out for those that may be thinking of renting to a marijuana dispensary or marijuana production facility, is that if you had a mortgage on your commercial structure and you have riders in that mortgage law or mortgage that's been filed that states that you need to comply with federal laws, you could potentially have your mortgage be called back on account for illegal activity. That's something to think about. So check your mortgage paperwork. You can either, if you don't have it already, you can request that from your bank, but probably the best way is requesting that from the title company. A lot of title companies keep that for many years after your closing, if you don't have a copy already. Properties also with marijuana operations require additional security such as self-closing and self-locking doors, 24-hour monitored security system, limited and control access to sensitive storage area, all of which would come back on the landlord as well, had those things not been put in place properly. Thieves also know that right now, currently, you can only purchase marijuana with cash. So that lends to large cash deposits as well as a large amount of high dollar inventory that criminals statistically have enjoyed. And historically, hey, it used to be illegal. Getting your hands on some legal material that's worth a lot on the street is still something that is sought after. So you could potentially be inviting some a threat to your property. Owners who have accepted federal historic preservation or low-income housing tax credits or Section 8 funding have to comply with state and federal laws. Marijuana used on the property could lead to allegations of fraud. Another point, owners are not the only ones who could be held liable. The risk also extends to the property managers, real estate agents, and others acting on the owner's behalf. Property insurance policies generally do not cover damage caused by illegal activities. Folks, make sure you're looking into this before you sign the lease on a dispensary. And not to mention, the properties that I've been selling, these applications that come in usually are folks that have almost no business experience or business experiences like tattoo parlors that are predominantly cash, really hard to prove their actual income. So a word to the wise, is it a bad investment? I don't know. Is it a more difficult one for an advanced look? You betcha. So think twice before renting to a dispensary or a production facility. I want to bring on our guest on the show today. Here's out-of-state investor Andrew Bergman asking some common questions you might find interesting. Okay, so I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for again having me.
Cool. You just flew into Oklahoma City yesterday, was it?
Yep, yeah, I got in yesterday afternoon.
Cool. And now you're on your second or third property here in Oklahoma City.
Yep. Yeah, third one here.
Okay. And largely that was because it's just a linear market, or what really drew you to Oklahoma City?
Yeah, so I like the area, I like the state. I lived just north of here for a couple of years, and would always come down to Oklahoma City to hang out, and just I like what the city is doing to kind of renovate itself and make it more appealing. And then with that, the home prices are still relatively low. And yeah, it seems to be a very linear market, and the rents are great. So.
Now you're comparing that to like the West Coast, where you just get these cyclical craziness, which is nice when you're on the rising side of it. Yeah. But I think now, I've got some friends that are, that have duplexes that are $600,000 and they can maybe rent for $4,000. It's like, in total. So it's just a money loss, and a lot of people are buying it and just like holding it to try to get appreciation. Mm-hmm. So and that's one thing that you and I have talked about is like, don't buy in like areas like Midwest City, banking on these huge appreciations. Yeah.
In fact, the only big appreciations we get really, quickly are the burrs, where you go in, you buy a house that's crappy and then renovate it yourself and then force equity, so. But you had a question earlier that I think is really important. So you said driving around yesterday, you were seeing like one house is really nice and then right next to a house that's really crappy. So something happened in the 80s, early 80s in Oklahoma City where we had kind of a boom of oil in the late 70s, and then we had these bankers that were giving out loans to small businesses and to home buyers based on this incredible market, and then and construction, new construction homes, and then the oil prices tanked in the early 80s, and then we also had a bank go under. When the oil prices tanked and a couple of the big oil executives then lost their salary, the banks then called those loans back, and they didn't have the cash because it was supposed to be a long strategy, and so that ended up knocking out a few huge big players in town, and you can read about it on Wikipedia. There's a huge article on it, but those banks going out of business combined with the oil price crash resulted in about 10 years of extreme poverty in Oklahoma City. And that led to, actually, we had Judy Lindsay, who's now actually passed away this year, but she was just a legend in town here for 35 years. She was on the board and everything. And she said there was literally bumper stickers on the back of people's cars that said, "The last one to leave Oklahoma City, turn out the lights, please." And that was really the sentiment of the 80s. And so that's what led to, methamphetamines hit us really tough then and still really worked all the way through the early 2000s. Meth was a huge deal. We also had gangs starting to take foothold from Los Angeles. We had like the 69ers come here and the GBCs, the Grand Central, coming from San Diego. And so we in the early 2000s were in the top 5 in the nation for most gang-infested city. In fact, we have a Gangland episode on the History Channel. It's called The Crazy Killers, for you crazy people want to see that. Which that documentary actually led to a couple of the big drug dealers being indicted because they actually admitted to killing people, admitted to crimes on this video. So the local law enforcement actually laughed when I talked, Captain Balderramo, I talked with him, and he was like, yeah, that actually led to some arrests. But make a long story short, so we had this disaster kind of zombie apocalypse scene going on here in the 80s and 90s. And we then really didn't have any economic thrust really until the last 10 years. So we went almost 20 years in just a real dire situation, long enough to where all the people that were the good minds and the successful business owners left and went elsewhere. We used to have some of the most beautiful women in the world as well. I mean, beautiful people, really kind of a California type look from, I wasn't here myself, but from the studies I've read, and that was largely because of the oil. I mean, oil brought in just the top people in the world. And then when that collapsed, they all kind of left. And so now that kind of left this poverty-stricken hopelessness, and those people that stayed here were on government assistance. And so we've also been kind of a test guinea pig for federal policy rollouts. So like in the 70s, we were part of the redlining, which was a federal program to basically give loans to African Americans, but only in certain areas. So if you were an African American in 1977, you could go to a bank, get qualified for a loan, but they would say, but wait, here's the map where you can use your loan. And so that was the northeast side of Oklahoma City. And so you had, a lot of wealthy African Americans buying up huge sections of the northeast Oklahoma City and then redistributing that to people that couldn't qualify for these particular loan programs. You also had Caucasian Americans buying land in the northeast and then redistributing that to African Americans. So there was a lot of things that kind of set in stone this perpetual poverty for the northeast side. So when you drive around over there, you can still see, and southwest side, it's very similar. You can still see that perpetual poverty that's just stuck in there. So, make a long story short, our zoning, our government infrastructure was obviously there was no tax dollars, so they were really underfunded. So the zoning laws that a city like Austin would have didn't really exist, and even if the ones that did exist weren't enforced. So you would have, a house that was built in 1955 next to maybe a vacant lot, and then they would just move in a trailer park there, or a mobile home, or they would have a lot of brick houses meeting a certain standard, and then there would be a frame home, built next to it, just as cheap as could be. Yeah. And so that's why when you drive down here, you'll see brick home, Tudor style, maybe a bungalow, and then boom, this frame style house that was probably 20 grand to build, or less. And it's just falling apart because it didn't meet code. So those are things also too when we're looking at buying homes that have been rehab or that need rehab, is understanding the levels of construction quality back in the day. So where you go, this house was just sold for $130 a square foot, and this house is right next to it. I bet we could get $130 a square foot. You probably can temporarily because the market is so energized here right now, but responsibly long term, probably not. And that's what I really ask buyers and buyers agents to do, is like really focus on the quality that you're building, because as investors, if we all agree to hold a line of code and the code enforcement's empowered, then we all kind of have a standard to compete against. Because right now it's basically a game of what can you get away with, and if you can get away with it, then you get more profit, and then you can beat the guy elsewhere. But what that results in, what I've seen just in the last 10 years of me working real estate, is we'll try to get a first-time home buyer in those homes. They're paying top dollar price because they're subway tile and wood floors and have been refinished, and they're all and they're white and they're new, and they're just like the Pinterest ad or Facebook ad, and so they pay top dollar, and then they move in there. They take their entire savings, which is not much now because it's really hard to save in America, and then they dump that into their down payment, and then they move in, and 6 months later their hot water tank goes out because it wasn't installed properly, or it was not really working when the renovator came in, but they kind of tweaked it to make it work enough. And then the AC goes out because they kind of just band-aided it enough to get it to work and pass inspection. And so now we have two huge purchases that this person has to do now with no savings. And so they've essentially started off their new, and then all of a sudden the house then begins to have issues because the drywall was over rotted, 2x4s, or lately I saw a story where literally a contractor had left like 24 sheets of drywall out in the rain, and it had just gotten wet enough to where they could kind of save it, so they saved all these drywall sheets, but then once they installed them, painted them, mold started to grow from the inside of those drywall sheets. And actually that happened at Tinker Air Force Base as well. That was a Chinese manufactured material or something like that, and it was laden with this mold. So that's where I see, like, we have a responsibility as investors to get the best deal, and to succeed in our businesses, but also with great power and great knowledge comes responsibility. And I think that's the element that's really not talked about a whole lot, is like, if you want stability in a community, you have to do things correctly. And we had Table Investments on the show, 2 weeks ago, and she was even saying, like, you have to stop, like, just duct taping the problems in your home and then stealing the equity out, because over time that results in a tenant that's really unhappy, that ends up destroying your property even more, and also driving down the economy in the area, because then they can't fix their car starts looking like crap, and then next thing you know, the neighbor's not fixing their home and all this. So that's kind of in a nutshell why the homes are the way they are, why they're fragmented. And that's why I think it's so exciting here, because there's an opportunity for, look at all these nice homes, and then there's this 3 bad apples on the street, and then you can come in there with the support of all those homeowners and refurbish those homes. So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It's it's just interesting seeing that fragmentation, kind of what you mentioned earlier, and it's an exciting opportunity, just as you're saying, to improve the community, improve the street, improve the neighborhood. And so
that's right. And the important thing too on that is that the appraisers know that, because an appraiser is all about what's the standard in the area. People think, oh well, it looks bad here. Well, that's all we've had, right? So when a buyer that's from here goes, they don't even notice it. I mean, when I first came to Oklahoma City, I was like, geez, no one's going to live on this street. But that's the way they grew up. That's normal. That's if you go to Washington D.C. and you see some of their streets there, it's crazy. But that's where they grew up. So that's normal. And same thing with the appraisers. An appraiser is tasked with what does the market in that region pay for a given price, and so everything's taken in hindsight of that. Now, I do want code enforcement to get better at what they're doing and have more resources. There's a lot of kind of renovators that work with the same code enforcement officers, and the lines kind of get skewed, as well as the plumbers. Most plumbers, they kind of just do the work as they know that inspector is going to be okay with, and sometimes the inspector doesn't even really check it because they know that particular plumber or whatever. And those relationships, I understand, are important, because you can't be everywhere as an inspector, especially when there's so many permits getting pulled. But there certainly needs to be a level of like, hey, here's the line we're all playing against, so that way there's kind of some fair competition here, So, and that's really just buyer awareness, and tenant awareness. Like we're doing a once a month, seminars now on the Northeast side to help, really get, first off, homeowners that never should have sold, that wholesalers are coming in and they're just like ripping these homes out of these people's family lineage because they have a leaky roof and they don't know how to repair it, or they don't have the cash for it, so they sell their home for $20. I heard last week an 87-year-old woman sold her home for $20 to a wholesaler on the Northeast side, because he had convinced her that she was going to be fined, that the state was going to come after her for her tax liens, and you were going to be not only sin on the street, but you were going to be jailed, and that all this fear. And then so she, of course I have to sell for, thank God at least someone's taking this off my hands, is what she was thinking, whereas that was very far from the reality. So I think we hope to kind of educate to stabilize the economy in the future. So, and then also tenant rights. Your tenants need to know, and I think as a successful landlord, you need to also equip your tenants with transparency and communication. Hey, I want you to be comfortable. I want you guys to be happy here, so that you feel like this is your home and you take pride in it. When the toilet paper rack, falls off the wall because that it's not, the drywall screws are not in, and they repair it. And they don't even call you. They just say, hey, I fixed this already. Thank you. I fixed this already, and I don't need to do a maintenance call anymore, because they're taking pride in their house, and those are the kind of stories that you hear when you build good relationships. So we had Johnny Mixon here yesterday, which was he's on the southeast side in a fourplex, and he actually is living in one of the units, kind of immersed in this culture. And so it's really been neat to hear those interactions and hear that it's almost back to the old Camelot days, where you had these the aristocrats owning the land, and then you had this very intimate relationship between you and the serfs, and so how that plays out in the future, I think, is going to be very important. So yep. All right, what else?
Well, just for an out-of-state guy who doesn't spend a whole lot of time in the city, how do you recommend folks like us get a pulse or have a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the city? And it kind of goes back to how do I know which neighborhood is developing or is in the line of progress, and then just kind of how to avoid those typical pitfalls of finding myself or finding yourself in a place where you don't want to be.
Sure.
What do you recommend for that?
Well, so the first golden rule, right, of any investing, especially in a linear market, is if the deal doesn't cash flow from day one, run.
Yeah.
If the numbers don't make sense the day you buy it, run. That's a salesman. That's a Ponzi scheme. Whatever you want to say, that is a danger. Like this whole mentality that we got into in the 2005, 2006 were like, well, the market's going to be great. It'll be a great buy in 3 years, and it wasn't. And the bank's not on your side on that, because the bank's underwritten by FDIC. They're going to get bailed out if they fall down anyways. So the whole thought, well, my bank's not going to let me buy a bad deal. No, they will. Trust me, they will. It is up to us as the homeowner to actually do our due diligence. And so if the numbers aren't making sense from day one, forget it. They have to make sense right then. None of this, we get this all the time. Hey, I see it's rented for $575. Oh, it's way under market value. You can get $975 for that home all the time. Oh, okay. I'll pay. Da da da. Some of that may be true, but the stark reality is most property management companies get paid off of how much rent they can charge. So when they're charging this low rate and they're not raising it ever, it's usually a sign that they know something that you probably don't about the area or about just the demand. And we can quickly now, with the power of Zillow, we can see what is the rent that's advertised in the area and how long has that advertisement been on there. If you're at $750 and it's been 45 days and they're still at $750, chances are, and they're the same amenities as yours, chances are it's probably only worth $700, maybe $675. So doing that number will definitely keep you out of trouble. The other thing, as far as how to avoid areas, I heard, I think it was, oh gosh, I can't remember her name, but she said, I heard locals on the south side talking about the more joggers we see in an area, the more scared we are, because then the rent's going to go up. So things like that, where it's community involvement and community exercise, that's one thing that I really appreciated this last trip in Los Angeles was, we were driving around in our rented minivan, and Rose, my wife, was just constantly saying, wow, people are like jogging here, running across the sidewalk. It makes me want to exercise more, and there was like groups of teenagers that were just like getting together to go running, and like, so there was a sense of well-being, of just like people are not in poverty here to where they're not worried, they're actually, they've got time to think about their health and then the restaurants too, healthy, vegan restaurants even over there on every street corner, and veggie options, and when a community is starting to think in that manner, that's when you really start to see, okay, they're really evolving into a new realm. So how do we spot then in a neighborhood? Well, it can even be things like grass cutting. I mean, the basics, are people taking care of their lawn? Do they have pride in keeping their lawn short? Are there vehicles parked on the grass? In Oklahoma City, that's a $100 fine the first time, and they'll fine you, I think, 7 times before they get more serious about your, fines. But that just shows I don't care. I'm just frustrated that I can't park here or whatever. So that's already an opposing force to the government, and that's a community that's kind of in a rebel state. So we also look at roofs. So we get hailstorms every 7 years. So if your neighbor, if you have 6 houses with brand new architectural shingles on them, and then you have Mr. Joe Blow, number 6 and 7's got a tarp on his roof or an older roof, well, he took that cash from that roof, or maybe didn't even care enough to call, and he's basically buying time living. So those are houses where you go, they're eventually going to default on their mortgage. Something's not adding up here. And so you kind of know where that is. Also, we can look at the crime maps too. And when crime, it's very important to look at crime in terms of where the city is relative to the city itself. So we're traditionally like 3 times higher crime rate than national average, but that's for 2 reasons. One, our reporting system reports every single call that goes in, whereas other cities sometimes just report calls that actually get a police report filed. We actually report every call. So if you call about a cat in a tree and the officer comes out and looks and says, the cat will be fine, that gets logged in the federal database. So that's kind of why automatically we're just so much higher. And then also too, remember that drug issue still being dealt with. We still have gangs here. Now we don't have what we had had in the early 2000s, which was drive-by shootings. That was a really bad epidemic, and the police really cracked down on that, which is great, because drive-by shootings are by far the biggest threat that a gang can present to a community. You have one news story about a drive-by shooting, neighbors are already thinking about leaving. So that was something that rolled out. But as far as trying to avoid areas that are on the downturn, noticing things like pride, taking pride in your home. Even if your neighborhood is like 100% tenants, you know, which some of these neighborhoods are like 95% tenants now. Even tenants that have a proper management company that is screening people and placing them in there, they'll still take care of their home, you know. So I think that's really the thing, is looking through them for that. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks. And then just real quick, so near-term future, everyone, including myself, you know, you hear the word recession, and it's coming, and it's coming. What has Oklahoma City done, in your opinion, to protect itself? And or what would you, if you could forecast something to happen, how would a recession hit the housing market here?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a great example from 2008, which really 2009 into 10 is when the recession hit us here. And we experienced, now we have a 3.5 to 4% appreciation each year here, statistically. And then that's based off of our MLS records, which really the way that record pans out is it's only about the last 15 years. So after the last 15 years, we've been steady at about 3.5%. Well, during the recession, we dropped 7.5 at our lowest level, was 7.5%, which rebounded within 3 years. So if we take that into account, so 7.5%, even if you did sell at the bottom of that, when you take into consideration the tax benefits you're getting from real estate and your cash flow that you were getting already, you really didn't lose that much. And actually, there's a couple of folks that have hard money loans, like Berry Rock Homes is one of them, where they base their entire business model off the 7.5% recession figures of Oklahoma City, in that they require a 7.5% down payment to get their hard money loans. Because their investors understand that that's the worst case scenario that we've experienced statistically, so we're going to hedge that bet and require 7.5% from the start. So this recession, I mean, I'm not going to say our economy is recession-proof, because no economy is recession-proof. But remember, when a recession happens, it's like water dropping on the ocean. You know, like the tide goes out, right, and everyone goes out together. So we're not trying to be the best in the planet here. We're just trying to be a better option than the house next to us, right? That's our gauge of you want to be better and thinking towards the future, but you need to compare yourself to the rest of the city. So this year alone, this last year, we've had 20,000 people move here, which is roughly 1.5% of our population, so 1.5% population increase, and a lot of those have been remote jobs. Now, the marijuana thing is definitely concerning for sure. I mean, there's not a single politician in town that would say, this many dispensaries is a great thing. I think we're kind of a experiment of free market, which is neat. I mean, I get it that they're allowing the market to do what they're doing. For those that haven't driven around here, I mean, you've probably experienced that yesterday driving around, where you're just going, do we need that many?
That was a new site, by the way. I didn't see that last time I was here. So. So
I mean, it's definitely kind of taken off, and I really don't even work with people that call me wanting to buy warehouses and stuff, because I'm just going, if you're not paying attention to the math here, you're wasting my time. If I'm going to drive around trying to find a warehouse for you to grow marijuana in, when I'm getting 6 of those calls a week, So, but yeah, no, I think we're going to see, and that was a 20% rise in commercial rental rates due to this whole marijuana push, which the economic forecasts on that is, and this was talking with CBD Plus. I've got some. I'm not going to say names, but I've got some contacts inside that company that have done a lot of economic research on this. And within 3 years, most of the companies will be gone. There'll be another wave which will come in, and then that third wave will then be the actual companies that make it here. So we've got really a 5-year kind of run of this kind of mom and pop coming up, and again, it's in your face everywhere. There's cannabis dispensaries just popping up, and each one of those little vapor things are $50 to $75, and so that's been kind of an issue because it's cash based. It's a cash based economy right now because the federal government has it outlawed. So you can't use your debit card because those are FDIC insured banks. So you have to go to an ATM and give cash. Well, cash is really tough to regulate on a local economy because who's to say you don't know where did you get this cash? And so a lot of laundering opportunities exist there, and so that I think is probably why there's a lot more dispensaries than make mathematical sense here. I mean, I had a guy from California calling me yesterday wanting to talk for half an hour about buying a warehouse, and none of his math made any sense. But knowing that this is a heavy cash economy, it is an interesting opportunity to then launder funds from out of state or out of the country through one of these cash businesses. So,
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so all in all, so I've got some questions for you. So I know you're relatively location agnostic, so when you're searching across the nation, what is it that you take into account when you're looking for deals?
That's a good question. That was kind of a hard, when I first started getting into real estate investing, that was the hardest thing, was to actually find a place that I wanted to focus on. So I just cast the net as wide as I could and was searching maybe a dozen different cities, and it was just exhausting. So when it came down to actual criteria, I wanted a linear market, something that would just slowly appreciate over time, kind of avoiding the West Coast, boom bust cycles. I was looking for a conservative state, conservative area, and then just again an area where the city was reinvesting in itself. And I know that's pretty broad in general. You could probably see that anywhere. But I liked what I saw happening in Oklahoma City. And just kind of going back to when I was in the area 10 years ago, and then just kind of seeing the differences over the last couple of years and what's been happening, with like the trolley car, just the parks everywhere, the running trails, the rec trails. It just seems like they're doing a lot to increase the attractiveness of the city. And then the other part of it is just kind of living in Oklahoma and enjoying my experience here and enjoying the people. I love to work with the folks down here. So that was honestly kind of what brought me or drew me to the area, was just that interaction with folks like you and stuff. So
Sure.
But and then the actual criteria on the homes, it still seems like an area where you can buy a home relatively cheap and still demand or get good rents to make the numbers work. And get that cash flow that you were talking about earlier. So
that's it. So I do want to bring up this topic because it was really, I did this whole Uber poll when I was in Los Angeles. For example, the drive into downtown, I was with one Uber driver, and it's like 45 minutes you're with this person, so you really get to kind of like meet this person. But on the way there, he was like, guns are illegal here. We don't even allow guns. No one has guns. Whereas the Uber driver on the way back was like, no, you could get a permit, and get whatever gun you want, as long as you get a permit, and so it was interesting first off to just know that you are influenced by your sphere of data, like who you're around and who you talk to influences kind of who you are. And so in this new age world where we're censoring all of our data on Facebook, which is just totally crazy. I mean, the new thing, the Donald, which is a site that creates these memes for political, has been essentially shut down off the internet by what has been linked to the Chinese members of the Chinese Communist Party. So it's really been interesting to see, and the reason behind that, when you look at the further article, is Facebook has stated that their AI system can't interpret memes.
Yeah.
So in order, they're really trying to control political, information this close to the election. So a meme, the computer can't get it because it's a joke. So they're just trying to outlaw them altogether, or really just shut down the main producer of political cartoons. And so it's really interesting for me, just from a historic standpoint, of can you imagine in 1930, some government or even a private corporation going around and pulling down cartoons off of a street corner. Or like we want you, the Uncle Sam, and somebody saying, oh no, you can't make those cartoons, because the cartoons were effective, and so that's really interesting. So. All of that, I think, is being combined with this huge fear that in 12 years our global climate's going to collapse and everything. And I posted on my personal Facebook, and I'm actually going to put it on the Oklahoma City Real Estate Show's Facebook, and we'll probably put it on the website too. But there's actually, so they show the chart, right, for the last 200 years or even 1,000 years, and it shows, how global warming is going up. But look a little deeper on the web and find the one that's 300 million years old and 600 million years old, and you'll actually see that the carbon dioxide levels have actually only been this low one other time before, and the temperatures have only been this low one other time before. So when we look at the scale, as much as we like to say, well, this is human-induced, it's all about humans, it's all about carbon taxation and all that stuff, the actual data, when you really stretch it out, does not support that. So I want to encourage people to look at it in terms of, yes, we will have a recession in America if we levy huge carbon taxes. Okay, if we get on this bandwagon of globalism and we say, we've got to stop, we got to regulate, carbon taxes, we essentially have then at that point given all these other nations an upper hand over our nation. And that's really the agenda in the long term, is to try to limit the American power in the world from being a dominant force anymore. And they're doing that through carbon taxation of our energy, because energy is our biggest thing. I mean, just think of how much an aircraft uses in energy, and then to tax that, to throw a huge tax on that, but then China doesn't get a tax. That's death. That's death economically. When it's an arms race as close as we are in today's world, and you tax one country and the other country doesn't because they're liars. So keep your eyes focused on reality, on real people, and real people in Oklahoma City are needing to rent. Stay in your affordability index and you'll be fine. I've been said that time and time again. Your affordability index here is that 150 and under, really 130 and under if you can get it. We're trying to get more inventory out there. We're sending out new mailers now, and we're doing Drive for Dollars, where Johnny and I are going to be literally driving around knocking on doors, simply because we're trying to fill that void of that 130 and under, so that we can get quality, affordable housing again, and kind of free up some of these others. And if you run into anybody that understands that affordability index, and really even the tiny homes, I'm researching that now. We've got this concept coming out now where, let's say, for example, I offer the gentleman $40,000 for his house, and that's maybe really what it's worth because it's falling apart. And he says, Landon, I'd like to take the $40,000, but I can't. Where am I going to go? I don't want to rent. I'm used to having no mortgage. I live off my pension check, this, that, and the rest. What I propose would be an idea is to then build a tiny home, which there's a company in Austin, Texas that's called New Hope or something of this sort, and they're using a 3D printer made by Ion, and it's a concrete mix that they put into a truck that's computer controlled, that then has this big long arm, comes over the top, and then pours and builds about a 600 square foot home. They can do a 400 square foot home, and the idea, and then they put a flat roof on it, and it's actually a really attractive small little home. It's modern looking. It's someplace that I would want to stay at. And so the idea is then, saying, well, instead of me giving you the 40 grand, how about I give you a brand new printed home in exchange, and then relocate you to this village, if you will, outside the city. And so those concepts is what we're currently working on now. The state and city just hate tiny homes. They view it as mobile homes. They view it as a bunch of transients and an issue with taxation in the future. So they've put a halt on it, but there's an organization called Pivot right now that has been the only institution in Oklahoma City that's been granted the permission to build tiny homes. And they're right across on Broadway Extension and Britton Road. So if you take Britton across on the northeast side of town, just right as you get over there, they have 8 acres they've set aside for 35 of these homes. And they're taking homeless youth, putting them in these tiny homes, and teaching them how to live in a subdivision. Tiny homes are built like a miniature subdivision. And we're going to be going through here. Actually, she just gave me full media permission over there. We're going to be documenting what's going on over there and trying to understand how does this work when we put these little tiny villages together? And then hopefully the state will then come by and say, yes, this is a good thing. Because when you have $100,000 in student debt and you have all this going on, you really can't afford this. A lot of the youth are happy with these tiny homes anyways. They're building them on their own. And so this would be a way to kind of free up some of that inventory that otherwise wouldn't. And so by all means, if you know anybody or anybody that's listening and watching this, get in contact with me. Support at okcreal.com. I'd like to start that dialogue if you've built tiny homes, and not necessarily the backyard tiny homes where you're just kind of a builder for yourself, but more of a community type tiny home. That, I believe, will be the answer for kind of solving this temporary wage crisis until we can kind of lock down our patents and stuff. So that's it. That's pretty much what I've got. Andrew, can you think of anything else that maybe might be a question somebody might have, or?
Thanks for the information. This is great.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, we're looking forward to a really amazing city. We are unique in that every single project that they're doing downtown is debt-free. So that's through our MAPS program, which is a penny-cent tax that we do for 7 years. December 10th is the next vote. So we're going to be voting on what the money's going to be spent on in 2027. So we'll tax for the next 7 years, and the money will get spent. So we're seeing the last year's the last set of fundraising happening now. That's Scissortail Park and the Convention Center, and some other funding for our schools. That's already impacting our home prices now. So if you're getting in now, then you can kind of wait till that 9-year period or that 10-year period, and you really are going to see yourself being able to either finance your home loan, assuming that the interest rates are still relatively low, and get that extra equity out. So pretty good stuff. Well, cool. This has been a good talk.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
For more information and to listen or watch online, visit okcrealestateshow.com. okcrealestateshow.com. okcrealestateshow.com.